The desert had a way of swallowing sound, holding secrets, and whispering them only when the wind decided the time was right. On that late summer evening, as heat waves rose from the cracked earth and the horizon glowed like a smoldering coal, Talon Black Fox rode his paint stallion along a forgotten trail carved between crimson cliffs. He was not searching for anything, not peace, not trouble, not company. A man who had buried more than he cared to remember seldom searched for anything at all. Talon lived with the land the way his ancestors had, quiet, watchful, and unbending. His hands were rough from breaking wild horses, his spirit tougher still. In the nearby town of Dry Mesa, folks called him the Apache, not out of mockery, but because he carried the grit and dignity of old warriors who once stood against storms of men and nature alike. Talon did not mind the name, for it reminded him of who he was and who he refused to become. That night the desert sky began to shift its pale gold, giving way to a bruised purple. A storm was coming, the kind that rose without warning, sweeping across the plains like a living thing. Talon could smell it long before the first rumble of thunder rolled across the valley floor. His stallion Ghostwind tossed his head uneasily. Easy boy, Talon murmured, stroking the horse's neck. We will find shelter soon enough. He was not wrong. Up ahead, half hidden by shadows cast from a towering rock shelf, stood the remains of an old trading post, weather-beaten, wood sagging porch and a rusted sign that once promised provisions and safe lodging. The post had not hosted travelers in decades, yet tonight its walls would have to do. As he approached, another sound cut through the wind, driven across the sand. A low hum followed by a frustrated groan. Someone was there. Talon dismounted silently, leading Ghostwind behind the porch. He was not a man who startled easily, but it was uncommon to find company this far out. Peering through the warped doorway, he spotted here a woman, sat cross-legged on the dusty floor, a camera bag at her side and a half-dismantled tripod lying helplessly in her hands. She wore faded jeans, hiking boots that had seen better days, and a white shirt now streaked with sweat and red desert dust. Her hair, sunlit brown and tumbling in wild waves, was pinned back with what looked like a pencil. She muttered to herself as she struggled with the stubborn tripod latch. Talon cleared his throat softly and stepped inside. Storm is coming. This place is not much, but it will hold, she yelped, dropping the tripod with a sharp clatter. Oh my God, she gasped, hand flying to her chest. You scared me, did. Not mean to, he replied, voice smooth but quiet. Did not expect to find anyone out here, she blinked, taking in every detail: the worn leather vest, the dark braids tied with rawhide, the expression carved from stone. Something in her eyes struck him. They were searching, not afraid, curious, the kind of eyes that sought to understand the world. I am Emily, she said after a breath. Emily Carter, photojournalist, or at least trying to be one, Talon, he replied, removing his hat and shaking dust from it. What brings you this far from any road a sane soul would take? She smiled with a spark of embarrassment. Chasing stories, trying to capture the Southwest the way people here see it, not the way travel magazines polish it up. I thought I knew where I was going, but I guess the desert had other ideas. She gestured to the broken tripod. And now this thing wants to fall apart on me. He stepped closer, knelt, and examined the latch. You are forcing it the wrong way. I am, he nodded. Happens when folks do not know the feel of something. With a gentle twist, he slid the latch into place. Emily let out a relieved breath. You have magic hands. Talon raised an eyebrow. Just experienced thunder cracked across the sky, shaking the beams overhead, and the first heavy drops of rain hammered the roof. Emily hurried to gather her gear. You were right, she said, glancing nervously at the darkening sky. This storm is serious. Monsoon season, Talon answered. The desert grows mean this time of year. Lightning flashed across the horizon, lighting the room in pale bursts. Talon checked the beams and nodded. This place will hold best. We stay put until the worst passes. Emily settled beside her pack, hugging her knees. You seem very calm. Are storms like this normal for you? Normal enough not to fear, dangerous enough to respect. The wind howled through the gaps in the walls, then the rain followed, fierce, relentless, flooding the air with a pounding drumbeat. Emily watched him in the half-light. Do you always travel alone? Most Of the time by choice by necessity, she nodded slowly, not pressing for more, and that small show of respect softened something buried deep inside him. "What kind of stories are you chasing?" he asked after a moment. "The real ones," she said. "Stories of people who live close to the land, of those who remember where they come from. Stories the world forgets." Talon regarded her with new understanding. Her tone was honest, grounded, not like the tourists who snapped pictures without knowing the dust beneath their boots. The storm raged on. Emily shivered as water slipped through a gap in the roof without a word. Talon removed his coat and placed it around her shoulders. "You will get cold," she said softly. "I am used to it." She pulled the coat around herself, breathing in the faint scent of sage and horses. "Thank you, Talon." He gave a rare half-smile. "Storm will not last all night. It should break by sunrise." "Still," she whispered, watching the rain carve silver lines down the window, "I am glad I am not alone." Her words hung in the quiet, ruined room and settled deep in the space between them. Talon had not sought company or conversation or anything close to connection, but the desert had a way of guiding two souls together when the land itself decided the moment was right, and beneath the wild storming sky a spark took root quietly and surely. The storm outside grew louder and wilder as the night deepened, and the trading post trembled under the pounding monsoon rain inside the dim shelter. Talon and Emily found themselves sitting only a few feet apart, yet the silence between them was not the cold, empty kind, but something warm and alive, like a flicker of firelight fighting the dark. Lightning flashed again, revealing the age-worn grain of the wooden walls, and for a brief moment Emily saw Talon clearly, his strong jaw, his calm eyes, his steady presence grounded in the way old trees root themselves into the earth. She had met all kinds of people in her travels, but none like him. Emily brushed a wet strand of hair behind her ear, fingers trembling slightly from the chill. She looked at him, studying him without meaning to, drawn in by the quiet certainty he carried. "You do not seem afraid of anything," she said softly. "Fear exists," Talon replied in a voice as steady as the desert itself, "but a man learns not to let it lead." She nodded, absorbing that truth. Outside, the sky cracked open again, sending a roaring wave of thunder across the valley, and Emily flinched ever so slightly. Talon noticed. "Storms are different out here," he said. "They come fast, and they do not ask permission." She laughed gently, a small sound swallowed quickly by the storm, but it warmed the space around them. "I think that is why I came here," she said, "to see things as they are, raw and real." For a moment neither spoke. Rain drummed on the roof in a heavy, relentless rhythm, like 1,000 hooves racing over the dry earth. Talon sat with his back straight, one knee bent, one arm resting on it, his eyes fixed on the storm outside as if it were an old companion he had known all his life. Emily could not help but admire the strength etched into his posture, the calmness carved into his features. Talon broke the silence first. "Why travel alone out here?" Her smile faded a little. "Because life is too short to wait for someone who wants the same path. I want to tell stories," she said. "Stories that matter. Most people want something easier, safer, predictable. And I guess I cannot blame them." She looked down at her camera bag. "This is the one thing I know is mine." Talon listened without interrupting, and something in the steady weight of his attention made her open up more. "My mother used to tell me that the land remembers honest people," she said, "and I think she believed it. Maybe that is why I chase these stories, to see if there is truth in old sayings." "Your mother was wise," Talon said with a nod. Emily looked up, surprised by the softness in his tone. "You speak like a man who remembers a lot of old sayings." "I do," he answered. "Some learned by words, some learned the hard way." The storm shifted, pushing a gust of cold air through the open gap in the wall. Emily shivered again, though she tried to hide it. Talon noticed once more, and without hesitation he moved the lantern closer and adjusted his coat around her shoulders. The gesture was simple and wordless, yet it carried a warmth she had not expected. "Thank you," she whispered again. He gave a slow nod as the storm raged on. The trading post grew darker and quieter inside, as though the rest of the world had faded away, leaving only The two of them, Emily reached for her notebook and flipped through pages filled with sketches, notes, thoughts scribbled during her travels. Talon glanced at the worn pages. You write down every place you go. Most of them, she said. Some places I write to remember. Some I write so I do not forget why I left. She hesitated, then added, some I write because I do not want the memory to fade. Talon understood that more than she realized, for he too carried memories he refused to let the desert swallow. The silence between them felt heavier now, not uncomfortable but meaningful. Emily looked at him with quiet curiosity. And you, Talon, what do you remember? He stared at the storm outside for a long moment before answering. I remember people who taught me strength. I remember loss that carved itself into me. And I remember that the land gives more lessons than any man ever could. Emily felt something shift in her chest at his words, a connection forming in the quiet storm-lit air. You speak like a storyteller. I am not, Talon replied, but you could be, she said with a gentle smile. For the first time that night he held her gaze, a long unbroken look that felt like the desert sun after days of cold shadow. Emily felt her breath catch. Something was happening between them, something outside the reach of logic or planning. The storm seemed to sense it too, for the thunder softened, the rain eased, and a gentler wind swept across the land like a blessing. Emily hugged her knees, drawing his coat closer. Do you ever feel like the land is trying to tell you something? She asked. Every day, he said. The question is whether we choose to listen. They remained there in shared silence, letting the storm speak around them. Emily could hear the distant rush of water carving new paths into the earth. Talon listened to the shifting wind. Two souls shaped by different roads, yet brought together by a single night. Emily leaned her head back against the wall. I never thought a night like this would happen, she said. Talon tilted his head slightly. What kind of night? A night where I feel like I ran into something I did not know I was looking for, she said. Something or someone. The words lingered in the air between them, raw, honest, and unguarded. Talon looked at her, a slow, careful look, as if deciding whether the earth had just shifted beneath him. Then he spoke in a low, steady voice. This night was meant to be only shelter from a storm, but the land decides more than we do. Emily felt her heartbeat quicken. Talon moved closer, not touching her, not crossing any line, but the small shift in distance felt like an entire world drawing together. The lantern flickered, casting their shadows across the wooden wall. Emily met his gaze fully. Talon he held her eyes. Emily, the storm outside began to fade, leaving only the whisper of wind across the desert floor. The air inside the trading post warmed with something neither of them could deny. A connection born in a single night, unexpected, unplanned, undeniable. Emily exhaled slowly, as if releasing something she had been holding for years. Maybe tonight is meant to be more than shelter, she said. Quietly, Talon breathed in the truth of her words. The land speaks, he whispered. Sometimes we listen only when the storm forces us to. Emily reached out, gently resting her fingertips against his hand. Talon did not pull away in. The quiet storm washed trading post under the vast desert sky, lit only by a lantern glow. One night meant only for survival became the night that changed everything. Morning came quietly, as though the desert itself wished not to disturb the two souls who had shared its storm. The night that had raged with thunder and fierce wind now rested under a pale gold sky, and the land stretched calm and wide like it had forgotten the violence of just hours before. Emily woke first, curling beneath Talon's coat still draped around her shoulders. The trading post was washed in soft early light, filtering through cracks in the wooden walls, turning the dust floating in the air into drifting grains of gold. She blinked, slowly gathering herself as memories of the night returned, not in pieces, but in one long warm wave. Talon sat near the open doorway, his silhouette outlined by the rising sun. He was quiet in the way only a man who had learned patience from the land could be. Emily watched him for a moment, sensing the weight of something unspoken settling between them. Part of her wanted to stay in the dusty, worn shelter, where time had paused for a night, where the world had shrunk to just the two of them, but the pull of the road tugged like an old familiar thread. She knew her life was full of places to go and stories to chase. Talon turned slightly as if feeling her gaze. Morning, he said, voice steady and gentle as the dawn ere morning. She answered, her voice softer than she intended. The storm left some flooding south of here, he said. The roads will be rough. Emily nodded, taking in the world outside. Desert wildflowers glistened with leftover raindrops, and the earth held the scent of fresh mud, sage, and sun-warmed stone. She stood stretching slowly, and Talon stepped beside her, offering his hand. She took it without hesitation, feeling that same spark from the night before travel up her arm. Thank you for the shelter, she said, for your help and for being here. Talon held her gaze a moment longer than necessary. The desert put us in the same place for a reason, he said. Emily swallowed lightly, unsure how to respond. She felt something deep in her chest, something new and unfamiliar, and she did not know if she was ready for it or if she had the right to take it with her. Packed up in silence, Talon saddled Ghostwind. Emily checked her camera gear and brushed dust from her notebook. Every movement felt heavier than it should have, as though the air itself resisted the idea of them parting. Emily walked up to him slowly. I do not know when I will be back out this way, she said. I know, he answered. People like you keep moving because the world has stories that need telling, and people like you, she said softly, stay rooted because the land needs someone who listens. Talon gave her a small nod. Maybe both are needed. There was more to say, but neither spoke it. Sometimes the truth sat too close to the heart, and words only scattered it. Emily lifted her bag, then paused. Talon. He looked at her, waiting. Last night was not something I can forget. I know that too, he answered. But the land gives moments and takes them back. What we do with them is on us. She stepped closer, heart pounding in a rhythm she had not felt in a long time. What if I do not want to let the moment go? He breathed in slowly, the morning light warming the side of his face. Then you must hold on to it until the land brings us together again. She wanted more certainty than that, more promise, more clarity. But she knew he spoke the truth in the only honest way he could. So she climbed into her truck a little slower than usual, and Talon stood by Ghostwind, watching her like a man memorizing something he feared losing. She drove away, feeling the trading post shrink in the rearview mirror. The desert stretched long and wide before her, but her mind was full of one night and one man. She touched the camera, resting on the seat beside her. The lens caught the morning sun, and for a moment she imagined capturing Talon standing in the doorway, framed by early gold light. She wondered if she would ever take that picture. Miles away, Talon watched the dust trail fade behind her. He did not chase it. A man rooted in the land knew chasing the wind only left you tired. Instead, he turned Ghostwind toward his ranch, knowing full well that the desert felt emptier that morning. The storm had carved new paths in the earth, and maybe in him too. He rode in silence, replaying the sound of her voice, the warmth of her hand, the quiet honesty of her eyes. He had not meant for the night to mean anything. He had sworn to himself years ago that he would not open. Parts of himself he had sealed away, but the land had a way of showing a man the truths he tried to bury, and Talon knew he would remember. Emily Carter until the day the desert turned to dust. Emily reached the next town just as a wave of sunlight rolled over the rooftops. She found a diner, cleaned her camera lenses, and tried to settle the flutter in her stomach. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw Talon's face in the stormlight, the way he looked at her, like he saw more than what she showed the world. She sipped her coffee, staring blankly at the open notebook in front of her. Words would not come. They had always come easily before, but now they felt tangled. She drew a small line on the page, then another, until the faint shape of a silhouette began to form. Talon standing in the stormlight, coat draped around her shoulders. She bit her lip. This was not supposed to happen. She had crossed countless towns and met countless people, but never carried anyone with her the way she carried him. Days passed, not many, but enough for both of them to feel the ache of distance. Emily returned to Seattle, pouring her focus into her assignments. City lights replaced desert stars, the sound of rain replaced the quiet whisper of wind. But she felt restless, like something in her no longer fit the life she returned to. She found herself scrolling through the pictures she had taken before meeting Talon, yet none of them felt alive anymore. She tried to write, but her thoughts wandered. Back to the trading post, to his calm strength, to the warmth of his silent understanding. Talon worked the ranch, but every sunset seemed to pull at him. The desert held memories the way it held water deep beneath the surface, and once stirred they stayed. He found himself riding near the trading post more than once, not looking for her, not expecting her, just remembering. The dust, the storm, the way she said his name. He did not believe in chance. He believed in signs, and her arrival felt like a sign he could not decipher. Some loves find roots slowly through long seasons, others strike like lightning and disappear. But this one lingered. This one stayed, even when miles separated them, even when silence stretched wide as the desert floor. Emily filled her journal with stories of the land, but Talon became the unwritten chapter, the one she could not release, the one she could not explain. Talon returned to his work, but every night as the stars rose, he felt the echo of that single night. He had tried to forget. He failed. He had tried to bury the feeling. The desert kept unearthing it, two souls walking different roads. Yet somehow each step taken away from each other deepened the pull between them. A night meant to pass like any other night had instead carved a place inside them both, a place neither time nor distance could erase, and though neither spoke it aloud, both knew. The story was not finished, not even close. Emily returned to the vast sunlit lands of the American Southwest with the steady beat of her heart, sounding like distant hooves against the dry earth, as though the desert itself recognized her presence and whispered welcome through the warm wind that curled softly around her shoulders. She arrived with her camera and her notebook, ready to work on a new assignment. Yet from the moment her boots touched the rough ground, she felt the familiar pull of memory tugging at her spirit, a gentle reminder of the night she once shared with Talon under a broken roof and a restless storm. Though she tried to steady her thoughts and push forward with her schedule, each step across the sandy trails made her recall the warmth of his voice, the patience in his dark eyes, and the way he had quietly opened his world to her for a single night that lingered far longer than either of them had meant it to. As she traveled deeper into the open land, the scent of sage rose around her in soft green waves, carrying with it a feeling of longing that settled in her chest like a fragile bird trying to take flight. Every canyon and ridge seemed painted with the memory of him, the memory she had tried to set aside while she returned to her city life. Yet the desert held those memories close, wrapped inside its timeless stillness, and now it offered them back to her one by one. Emily finished setting up for her assignment near a small reservation community, and as the sun began to lower in the sky, she decided to walk toward the horse trail that wound along the edge of the valley, a trail Talon had once described when she asked him where he found peace. She walked slowly, letting the earth speak to her through its crunch and silence. And she felt an ache rise inside her because she knew she was walking towards something she could not name and could not avoid. When she rounded a hill brushed with dry grass and golden light, she froze because they're standing beside two strong horses. With the light blazing behind him, as if the sky itself bowed to his shape, was Talon. His figure was steady, calm, and familiar, and though months had passed since they last saw each other, the moment their eyes met, time seemed to fold in on itself, like the desert had taken hold of their past and placed it gently at their feet. Emily felt the breath leave her, yet not from fear, but from recognition, the recognition of someone who had carved a quiet place in her life without meaning to. Talon looked at her with surprise, but behind that surprise was something softer, something that flickered like ember fire and warmed the space between them. They stood facing one another in a silence that did not feel empty, but instead felt like a bridge, built from all the words they had not spoken and all the truths they had not dared to admit when they parted. Emily stepped closer, letting the warmth of the moment guide her, and Talon moved as well, though with a measured calm, as if he feared breaking the fragile connection that was forming again between them. When they finally spoke, their voices were low and gentle, carrying No blame, no regret, only quiet honesty that drifted between them like a slow-moving river. They talked about her travels and his work with the horses, and though their words were simple, the meaning behind them reached far deeper than the surface. They walked together beneath the orange sky, allowing the fading sunlight to wrap around them as though blessing the fragile. Reunion Talon invited her to ride with him the next morning, and she accepted with a lightness she had not felt in months, because with every passing moment the desert seemed to guide them back toward a place that had never fully closed. The next day Emily met him at dawn, the sky still painted with pale colors of waking light, and they rode side by side across the open land, letting the rhythm of the horses smooth the tension that had once existed between them. As they traveled, Talon showed her the land that shaped him, the ridges carved by old winds, the trails remembered by elders, and the quiet watering hole where wild horses gathered during the summer heat. Emily captured images of these moments through her camera, yet every time she looked at Talon, she felt she was capturing something far more powerful than scenery. She was capturing a man who carried history, strength, and tenderness in equal measure. With each passing hour, their laughter grew warmer and their silences grew deeper, and though doubt occasionally whispered within their hearts, neither turned away from the path they were walking together. Emily thought of the city life waiting for her far north and wondered if she could truly return to it with her heart anchored to this place, and this man Talon wondered if he could open his life to her fully despite the wounds of his past and the weight of tradition that shaped him. Yet each fear that rose within them was gently brushed aside by the moments. They shared moments filled with sincerity and quiet affection that grew stronger beneath every sunrise. One evening they sat together beneath a sky of endless stars, the air cool and soft around them, and they spoke about the challenges that stood between them, challenges of distance, of culture, of the fear of losing something they had only just begun to rediscover. But as they spoke, they realized that the road ahead did not need to be walked in perfect certainty, it only needed to be walked with willingness and trust. Emily felt her heart stir with the understanding that she had not returned to the Southwest by chance, but because some deeper part of her had always been guiding her back to him. Talon felt the steady truth rising within him that Emily was not a passing moment in his life, but a presence that had already changed him in ways he could no longer deny. As they continued spending time together, the road between them grew smoother and the weight of doubt grew lighter. Because they chose again and again to step forward instead of turning away, the desert night wrapped them in its deep silence, and both of them finally understood that their story had not ended in the storm of their first meeting. Instead, it had only paused, waiting for them to be strong enough to return and continue. And so, under the vast sky filled with light from 1,000 distant stars, Emily and Talon took their first true steps back to each other, guided by the land, the night, and the quiet certainty that some connections are meant to find their way home, no matter how long the journey may be. The desert dawn rose with a soft gold glow stretching across the horizon as Emily walked toward the small corral where Talon was brushing down one of his horses, and the quiet warmth of the morning wrapped around her like a blanket woven from sunlight and memory. She paused for a long breath, letting the peaceful scene settle into her heart, because she knew she was standing at the threshold of something she had once believed impossible, something fragile yet strong enough to survive distance, time, and the quiet fears both she and Talon had carried for so long. Talon looked up at the sound of her footsteps, and the gentle recognition in his eyes sent a ripple through her soul, a reminder of the night when everything began, and the many days since, when every small moment with him had woven itself into something she could no longer deny. They walked together toward the open field, surrounded by tall grasses swaying in the breeze, and though no words passed between them, the silence felt full of meaning and unspoken understanding. When they reached the hill that overlooked the valley, Talon stopped and gazed out at the land, his land, the land that shaped every part of him, from strength to sorrow and from duty to hope. Emily stood beside him, feeling the wind wrap around them both, and she realized How deeply she felt connected not only to him but to the world he belonged to, a world she had once only captured through a lens, but now felt living inside her. After a long and tender silence, Talon turned to her with a softness she had never seen before, and though his expression was calm, the truth held within it shone brighter than the rising sun. He told her that he had tried to forget her after she left months before, and that he had convinced himself their night together was meant to be nothing more than a memory carried on the wind, yet every night beneath the stars and every dawn beside the horses reminded him that some people find their way into your heart without warning, and once they are there, no amount of time can make them disappear. His words flowed with quiet sincerity, and Emily felt her heart swell as she listened, because she had carried the same truth inside herself through every long workday, every sleepless night, and every lonely moment since returning to her city life. She stepped closer, letting the wind sweep her hair across her face, and she spoke from the deepest part of her spirit, saying she had spent months pretending she could return to her world unchanged, yet every time she looked at her photographs, she remembered not the images, but the man who stood behind them, the man whose presence turned a single stormy night into something that had shaped her future. She told him she had realized that no story she could chase across the country felt as meaningful as the story that lived between them, a story that had begun unexpectedly but now felt truer than anything she had known. Talon listened with the steadiness of someone who carried honor as naturally as breath, and when she finished speaking, he reached out with gentle certainty and took her hands into his, letting the warmth between them close a distance that had existed only in fear. They stood together on the hill, the wind swirling around them, carrying the scents of earth and sage, and the whisper of something ancient watching over them. And in that sacred quiet, Talon made a promise. He told her he did not offer her a life without challenges, because their worlds were different and the road ahead would require patience, respect, and understanding, but he promised to walk that road with her step by step and to keep space for her in his heart, his home, and his future. Emily felt tears gather in her eyes, not from sorrow, but from the overwhelming sense of rightness washing over her, because she knew she had not come back to the desert by chance. She had been pulled here by something that connected them beyond logic, beyond distance, and beyond time. She lifted her hands to his face and spoke a promise of her own, saying she did not need perfection or certainty, only the chance to build something real with the man. She could not forget the man who had given her a night that changed everything, and a future she now dared to imagine. Together they walked down the hill, their steps falling into natural rhythm, as though their bodies already understood a truth their hearts had only just begun to speak. As the sun rose higher, they saddled the horses and rode across the wide valley side by side, their shadows stretching long behind them like a path that showed how far they had come and how far they would go together. The wind swept past them, carrying their laughter into the sky, and Emily felt for the first time in her life that she was not just traveling, she was arriving into a life of purpose, love, and belonging. Talon glanced at her while they rode, and she saw the quiet joy in his expression, the joy of a man who had found something precious and dared at last to hold on to it. They continued riding until they reached the sacred ridge where Talon often went to speak with the ancestors, and he dismounted with a reverence Emily felt in her bones. He invited her to stand beside him, and together they looked out at the landscape stretching endlessly before them, the land that had held their first night and now held their new beginning. Talon whispered a prayer to the wind, a prayer of gratitude for guidance, for strength, and for the path that had led them back to one another, and the wind seemed to answer with a warm sweep that wrapped around them like a blessing. Emily closed her eyes, letting the sensation fill her, and when she opened them, she found Talon watching her with a look so tender it lit something fierce and beautiful inside her. They held each other in the gentle embrace of the desert morning, and for the first time they both knew without doubt that their story was not a fleeting moment, not a passing chapter, but a lifelong journey written in every breath of wind that crossed the land. The desert held them, the sky blessed them, and the wind carried their promise forward into a future where love was no longer a memory but a living truth they would build side by side. And so their story continued not with an ending, but with the beginning of a promise carried through the air, a promise that they had finally found the one person they could not and would never forget.